And tonight we're going to talk about using Puzzilla to find ancestors and descendants. I really like this program. This is one of my favorite programs. And I think it's something that a lot of people aren't aware of. And so it's good to kind of go over this periodically and talk about it because it's a tool that we can all benefit from. So one last thing, and I think I'm ready to go here. Okay, so what is Puzzilla? Puzzilla is a program that's been created that's what I call a hyper-condensed visual family tree view. In other words, it's a program that allows us to see a huge block of your tree all at one time and to be able to use that view to help us in finding where we can find people that need family added to them so that we can have names for the temple. And it works both in ancestral views and descendancy views. It's a third-party product that's supported by the church. And Puzzilla will use the data that you have in tree. So the quality of what's up there will be based on the quality of your tree, and they can't do anything about that. That's our responsibility to check things out carefully when we're using this program, because it's only as good as what it can get from out of the tree to begin with. So we want to use those same cautions and practice the same kinds of checks and things like that that we do when we're just plain old working in tree. We want to keep looking for duplicates. We want to be very careful and try to find all the records we can for people so that their records are as accurate as possible before we reserve names and make sure the people therefore are properly identified. So this is what the page looks like. Puzzilla's got, is a takeoff on the word puzzle, but it's spelled a strange way. And you got to make sure you spell it with 2 Z's and 2 L's. And it's an org, not a com. So Puzzilla.org is where you want to go to. And you should get this blue page. It's a web-based program. So you can pull it up on any device that can get on the internet. It's not an app. It's not anything of that nature. It's strictly a web page. And you have 2 ways that you can sign in. There's a huge sign-in bar in the middle, and there's a sign-in up in the corner. And as you'll learn tonight, there's 2 versions. There's a free version and a pay version. We'll go through all that. When you first sign in, like any of the third-party products, it's going to require that you give them permission to look at, look at your data and your contact information so they can find you in tree and then share with you your tree. So this is what happens when you first say okay. It's going to build your tree. This is an ancestor view, so it kind of looks like a tree. It's one of the 2 different kind of views that you'll see in Puzzilla. We'll first talk about it based on the free version of it. Okay, so when you first sign in, it shows you this tree. There'll be a circle showing where you are, because it starts with you at the beginning. So that little circle out in the middle of the tree represents me. And then the red dots on the tree represent females, and the blue squares represent males. So you can tell which person is a male, which one's a female based on the color. You can set the tree to have up to 12 generations. You really don't want to do that because you're going to have so many people out in those higher generations that it's just going to look like a solid mass. You can change the ID, and this comes in handy. The way it's set is you sign in, and then it takes you to you, because that's the base person in your tree. There may be times that you don't want the tree to start with you. You might be working with a patron. And so you can set a different ID to be the base ID so that you can either do an ancestry or a descendancy of somebody else other than you. And so that can come in handy at times, and we'll show you a little later one reason why. Okay, there's a box at the bottom left that tells you who the primary person is on that screen. And then usually it shows you a path from you to that person. But since that's me, there's no path there. It just says that I'm there. There's three kind of filters that are on the screen. There's one that's for born inside the 110-year rule, because of course that's a rule that if you're a person born inside 110 years, we have to have permission to do the work. And so it's showing on this tree two people that have this little tiny gray box. It's hard to see it there because the boxes are small, but my mother and father both had a gray box on them. Now, this picture was actually taken several years ago. If I did it today, my dad would not have a box on him because he's outside that limit. And so, things have changed there. But anytime you see somebody with the gray box, those are people that if you want to do their temple work, you're going to have permission from the closest relative. So that's one of the filters that can be used, and it's on all the time. Another one is died before the age of 16, and that's a fairly obvious one. People that die before the age of 16 or 16 and younger generally don't have any descendants. Now, on a tree like this, an ancestry tree, you wouldn't expect to find anybody marked with a yellow box. I've actually had one on this tree at one point because somebody put a person in who was born in, I think it was like 1750, and they recorded it as 1850 so that they died after they were born. Well, that made them less than 16 years old, so they were marked in yellow. So I knew right away there was a problem. So normally you don't see that on pedigrees, you'll see that on the descendancy. And it is kind of sad to see the thousands and thousands of little kids that died young. But they are marked in yellow. And then there's a third filter called targets. These are the end of line people, whether we're talking about the end of line of ancestors or in the descendancy, the last person coming down that we know. These are the people we're after. They're our targets because they're the most likely place, and I mean not the only, but the most likely place that we'll be able to add people to, add spouses, add parents or children, depending on which direction we're going. And so the targets is, this target filter allows us to see very quickly with a bright red box by the person's name that they are a target person. The one thing we don't see on these trees normally, at least in the descendancy view, you won't be able to see the spouses. In a tree, in the ancestry view, you do see if there's a spouse. But when we turn to the descendancy view, spouses aren't shown. The target will help point out to us that we've got people that still have people that need to be added to them, even in that view. Okay, so if I turn on targets, this is what it shows. And I can see immediately in the pedigree where I want to go to maybe add somebody to the tree. Now, what you don't see right now is if I took my mouse and I hovered it over one of those either blue circles or red squares in the tree, you would see who the person was. We'll show you that on the next screen. But for right now, I just wanted to show you that this target shows up very bright on the screen and is very visual in helping us to see where we might want to go looking to see if we can do some work. So here's an example where I'm in the tree and I went over to one of those red boxes and I clicked on the person's little box, a little blue box for Matthew McDowell, and that little blue box turns green when I actually click on it. And when I do that, that little box pops up here that gives us information about him. So now I know the name of the person that that symbol represents, their birth and their death information. And then I also have 3 options. I have 3 things that I can do. I can look at his descendants. I can look at his ancestors, but since he's the dead end on the pedigree, I'm not going to see anything if I click ancestors. And I can go straight into family tree to that person. We'll be doing a lot of that, of switching from the ancestors to the descendants for somebody, and then go viewing in the tree different people in that descendancy. And so it's a nice quick way to move around from Puzzilla to tree, and maybe go back to Puzzilla and go back to tree. And you can flip back and forth pretty fast. And every time you leave Puzzilla, it will open up a new window. It'll never override a Puzzilla screen. So those screens will stay there for good. Now that I'm not on myself, this little box that is there telling me that I'm on Matthew McDowell comes in handy, because it tells me how to get from me to Matthew. I might not need this for my pedigree, but if I'm doing some work on somebody else, for say a patron, that's real nice, because I can go in there and do a copy and paste and put that in my notes where I'm writing out the things that I want the patron to do. And I'll have this to help me know where to go to navigate to get to these people. And so that's a nice little tool to steal and copy. Okay, now remember, the key point here is we're going to use Puzzilla to see the big picture. Once we've seen the big picture, we're going to use it to help us identify where we can find a dead end, either dead end ancestor or a dead end descendant, so that we can then go over into tree and try adding sources and do any merging that might need to be done, and hopefully add some new people into tree so that we can do their temple work, or possibly just identify some people that are in the descendancy or the ancestry that need their work done that are already there. And so usually what we'll do is we'll click on view and tree to actually do our work. Now, when I click on descendants, the tree looks totally different. And at first glance, it can really look crazy. And so to help you out, I've added some circles. These circles are not going to show up on your screen. I did this to help you kind of identify what's going on. In the middle of the circle will be the person whose descent we are looking at. In this case, we're looking at Matthew McDowell's, or we're looking at Ephraim Jenkins' descent. Ephraim's the guy that's shown in the bubble right there. And you can see how to get to him from the information that's in the lower left. Now, the yellow circle represents his children. The next circle out, the blue, represent the grandchildren. So for children, there's 4 children. There's a child here, a child there, and a child there. They represent that inside circle. The grandchildren are scattered around this circle. There's quite a few more of them than there were children. Then the next generation out, the red line, the red circle, represent the great-grandchildren. And then I didn't make a circle for the outside band, but those would be the great-grandchildren. And so it's organized in the distance out from me, but it's a little confusing at first for people to follow, because you have to visualize those circles to kind of help you keep track of what's going on. You'll see in this case that there is a yellow line going down through here. And that yellow line represents the path from the person in the middle, which was actually Matthew McDowell, I mean, from Matthew down to me. It's showing what I call the yellow brick road from Matthew, from the person in the middle down to me, since he's my ancestor. And so that's there to kind of give you a clue where your actual pedigree line is in this descendancy. But oftentimes I stay away from my direct line and I'll work on the other parts of the tree. You'll notice a few of the kids here actually do have the yellow boxes. There weren't very many there. In fact, I think there were just 3, if I'm not wrong, 2 or 3. 3. And so that's kind of unusual. Usually there's more young children that died than what's showing here. So it could be that there's kids missing, because you would expect from this many people there'd be more than 3 babies or 3 little children that died. Infant mortality was horrible in the past. Okay, if I had targets, that view I had just shown you, I couldn't do targets with because it was an old version of Puzzilla. Turning on the targets, you see all the red boxes. Those help draw your eye to the places where the people are a dead end. They never do show any targets on the last generation out on the circle. That one's never highlighted for whatever reason. Okay. But it helps you to kind of see. And when you have a large involved tree, fitting on the target sometimes helps you too, because there's so many dots all over the screen, it's hard to visualize where you might want to go. Okay, so let's just show a little bit about how this works. So in this tree, I chose a person in this descendancy and clicked on his name, and his name was John Bond Jenkins. And I saw that he was born in 1831, died in 1910, and he's an end of the line person. So I figured, well, this will be a person that'll be worth looking at. He's a target because he has no children showing. And so I went to him. I said, View in Family Tree. And we'll just talk about this one. I won't take you there. But I said, View in Family Tree. I went from there to the Family Search hints off of his person page, found his death certificate where it named his parents. So I knew I was on the right person because it had the parents that I expected. And it also named a wife, and she wasn't in tree. So I knew he had at least a wife and maybe kids. I went back to the sources for him again in Family Search, found him on the 1880 census when he's 49 years old. And I found him with that wife and 7 children who were not in tree. And when I put them in, that whole family then became names for the temple. Even after I did work on them and added other information, they all stayed green. And so I had a whole family just from doing one little thing like that. But it was easy to get there because this allowed me a fast way to navigate around in a descendancy to where I might find something of value to add to tree. And it's as simple as that. It's not always that simple. But in this case, it turned out to be really good. That one little click ended up giving me 8 new names for the temple. Okay, now that was just doing the free version of Puzzilla. And you can use a free version from any device that has internet and has a browser. You don't have anything to download, no app or anything like that. And you'll be able to use the died before 16, born within 110, and the target filters. Now, there is a pay version. It's $39 a year, so it's costly, but it has some real advantages. One nice thing about that is you can go to the Family History Center, anybody can, and use that pay version for free there because it's on all of our computers at the Family History Center. the paid version, and you can use it for free there. So it makes it very convenient for you to have a chance to test out these features without having to share, pay out any money. Now, the thing about this is somebody in your family needs to pay for it if you're going to have it in your family. So like I pay $39 a year, $39.95 a year. My wife, Barbara, can use it. The only catch is she'll have to sign in with my username and password in Puzzilla because it's registered under my name. But I've talked to the developer about this, and he says they're totally okay with that. They intended it to be that way. They want the whole family to have access to it, not just the one person that pays. So, you and your kids and your spouse can all use this program for one price. The only catch is you'll have to sign in using the person that paid for its account. The tree that it builds will be that person's tree. So you then will have to go up there where it says change ID and change the ID to somebody who's dead. And then you'll be able to use the pay version of Puzzilla. So this works good for other people in the family that want to work on their own line, or if they're a consultant and they're trying to help a patron, they can work on the patron's line. The only thing, don't try to give it an ID number of a living person. It won't search for living people because FamilySearch doesn't do that. You've got to give them a deceased person. So like when my wife signs in, she can't see herself, but both of her parents are deceased, so she could put in either her mom or her dad's ID and it'll take her there. Okay, so what do these different tools, these extra filters do? We'll kind of go through them. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit targets just so we can see everything, and I'm going to filter the targets down to people who were born between 1830 and 1910. And I want to do that so that I'm highlighting the people, the people on this tree who are in that time frame where I'm most likely going to find work that I can do, because they'll have a lot of records that can be used to add things. That 1830 to 1910 period is a real good period for searching records. Okay, now I can click on ordinances. I can add ordinances to this, and you can click on as many of these things as you want, and they'll just add little boxes to everybody. So I've still left the targets on, and then I clicked ordinances. I want to know everybody in this view of the descendancy that need temple work of some kind. And they have a little green box by them. You'll see a lot of green boxes out here on this outside row. I should warn you, you see a green box with a gray box above it. Those are people who have work that can be done, but they're born inside the last 110 years. They're all going to need permission first before you can reserve them. But as you go around that outside ring, here's two people that are green, but they don't have the little gray boxes, so they could be reserved. And so in this case, as I looked at this tree, I noticed this whole family of kids. There's 4 kids here, and they all have the little green box. So I clicked on one of them. It's Anna Coleman. And because they all had green boxes, I figured, well, either a member's been through here and added names and not taken them to the temple, or took them to the temple and shared them, and they're going to show green that way, or some non-member has added the names in here. So I choose Anna, and when I clicked on her and looked at her and all the rest of the kids in the family, they all needed work. And a couple of them even had spouses that needed work. And so just looking at that little family, I found 6 names to take to the temple. And it made it really an easy way to locate people. by doing that, and I was able to reserve them without hardly any work at all. Okay, My Changes is a feature that's nice. If you get involved in this after a while, it becomes kind of addictive and you do a lot of work in tree. And you might be working on the descendancy of a certain person, working your way around that chart. But then you come back tomorrow, you might not be able to remember, where was I working before? Well, it's real easy. You can click on My Changes and it'll check everybody in that tree view, whether it's a descendancy tree or an ancestry tree, and it will mark anybody that you've left your footprint on with that kind of plum colored box. In other words, if you've changed a person's name or added a date or changed a place or added a source, did anything to that person's record that left your name there, it's going to mark them. So if I had been working in this tree and I came back today and I said, now I wonder where I should start. Well, the first thing I'll do is click My Changes, and I can see I've got some kids here that don't have that little box on them. Here's a family over in here that doesn't have that box on it. And out here's another one. So I can see where I can go today to do some more work, because I don't want to work on all these others where I see my little plum box on everything. So it shows me where I've been, which is a very nice little feature. Okay, possible duplicates. This is phenomenal because it's really the only place in FamilySearch Family Tree, the only way that you can look in a big section of your tree and discover where possible duplicates are. Most of the time, you don't know a person has duplicates until you click on their page, and then you look over on the right-hand side in the right-hand column, and it says, oh, there's a possible duplicate. Well, in this tree, I can turn on possible duplicates, and that kind of purple colored box will appear, and that tells me that that person has a possible duplicate. The one in the red circle is another example. Now, it's always possible that those possible duplicates aren't really duplicates, but most of the time they usually are. The other thing to realize is, even if the people don't have the possible duplicate symbol there, that doesn't mean there isn't a possible duplicate. You need to be careful and look for duplicates, even though it may not show up here, because as you add more information to a person, often duplicates start suddenly appearing because you now have enough information to identify them. And you may find that duplicates are difficult to do. If they're too complex for you, just leave them alone, go somewhere else. If you are inclined to work on these duplicates, that's wonderful, because in this case, Norman has a duplicate. By cleaning it up, it helps to make the tree that much more accurate. It eliminates a duplicate of him. It brings things together so they're all nestled in the same family. And it's really a good process. So even though you might not be adding any new names to take to the temple, you're making the tree better. Okay, there's a search feature which allows you to do a bunch of different kinds of searches with this data. You can search for a place, like I did here, Pennsylvania. You can search for a certain ID on somebody, if you know their ID number, or a name. You could search for a certain last name, like you want to see where the Jones line is here, or on a date or a date range. Maybe you want everybody who has a date for birth or death between 1700 and 1750. It'll highlight them. So I did a search for just the name Pennsylvania, for the state of Pennsylvania. And you can see that almost half of my ancestry, at least a full third anyway, of my ancestry is all in Pennsylvania, because I have a lot of Pennsylvania ancestors. Even have one lone one way over here that somehow got into the mix. Went from Pennsylvania and migrated south and got into my Gibbons family. Okay, now sources. You can also click on sources to see if people have sources or not. In most cases, most everybody has a source. But occasionally you'll find people like this in the circle here, where there's a whole family that apparently nobody's done any sourcing on. That would be a prime place to go to do some research, because they don't have any sources attached to them. Also, notice all the yellows on this screen. This is more typical of what you're going to find in many families. A lot of young children that died. And so sources is yet another filter that you can use. Okay, another search. I'm doing a different search this time. One that's kind of interesting for those of us that have ancestors in the church. When they created Family Tree, or actually when they created New Dot Family Search before Family Tree, when they brought in the original church membership records, they were assigned, because it just happened to be the random numbers that were being attached to things that day, KW at the beginning of our IDs. Most of us, if you look at your ID in Family Search, it starts with KW. And so you can do a KW search and it will put a aqua colored box on everybody who has KW in their ID. Now, it's possible you'll get somebody where there's a KW somewhere else other than the beginning of the person's ID. But this shows you in my tree, my LDS line. I just have that one wedge of my pedigree that's LDS. And all the rest of it is virgin territory, stuff that had to be developed from scratch. And that's something that's kind of fun to do, to kind of get a feel for where the church is in your tree. Okay, hints. That's, I think, the last of these filters that they have. You can turn hints on and it will tell you people that have hints. And so that's wonderful, because that's usually the way that we have a real fast way to add new names to tree, by processing the hints on people. So if you like turn on the targets, the red targets, and then turn on the hints and go to all the people that are marked red with targets and have the orange hints, you'll be able to find people real fast that you can do some processing of hints and hopefully add names. In this particular view right here, there's a whole slew of people that I could go to. Here's a couple here, here's 3, 4 here in a row that are easy to hit. Here's another one now, somebody who died before the age of 16. I might add the hint just to help them, their record be better, but I'm doubting, unless that's a mistake, that it's going to lead me to new names for the temple. But I can at least, maybe make that record a little more complete. But there's a lot of hints in this area that I can work on. And it just saves, these things all save me time as I'm working towards deciding where I'm going to go to try to add names to the tree. Now, they do have one new thing that they've added, and this is called new person. I'm personally kind of on the wall on this one, whether I like it or not. It's a little bit different. It's a little more complex. The goal is to help you find a person who will for sure provide you an opportunity to add names. And to do this, though, you have to do something that you don't do for Puzzilla anywhere else. You're going to have to use Chrome, because to do new person, you're going to have to add a Chrome extension for Puzzilla. And so this page walks you through the fact that you need to get Chrome for a browser if you don't have it, and then download this extension for new person. Okay, and then to use it, you have to turn hints on, and then you press new person, and then you have to wait, and it really does take some time. You can go out and practically go shopping and come back if you've got a big Descendants view that you're working on right now, and it'll probably still be working on it because it takes a lot of time to process all the hints on all the people, trying to find some new people that they can add. Excuse me, this is going crazy. So what happens when you do this, if they find somebody that they are confident you'll actually be able to add a name, they'll put a black box by that person's marker in Puzzilla. And when you click on it, you're going to see who the person is, and there's going to be a new person hint or hints there. You'll be able to select that hint, go into Family Tree to Source Linker, process the hint, and it says you should be able to add new people to tree. Quite frankly, I can do it on my own a lot faster. And often this doesn't find very many people, but it does work. Now they do try to warn you, quality, it's only as good as the records it's working with. So treat it with, caution, skip situations where things seem strange. Be aware that you're going to need to look for duplicates and things like that. And then the other thing too, as far as just general usage for tree in general, is don't get carried away. And this is one of those things that's going on right now, where they limited our reservations to 300 reservations now, the unshared names that you've reserved. Be cautious and don't overdo it, because you're taking away the opportunity for other people that want to have a chance to find names And so, they're trying to say, don't get carried away with this, because technically, really, with this program, you could probably develop a lot of names. Okay. Now, when you do use this new person thing and you run it the first time, it's going to tell you, you first click on the hints button and have the hints load, and then you click on the new person button. Okay. So now this is the part of the presentation where we talked about all the parts of the program. Are there any questions? I have some more. I've got an actual demonstration to do, but I'll stop for a minute and take some questions if we have any. My camera's not working. Oh my gosh. You can't see me. Oh. Any questions? Okay. Well, let me show you an actual walkthrough, a real walkthrough of a demonstration. Not very long. We'll get through it fairly easy. First thing is, where are you going to go? We're going to do it pretty much like I've taught for anything else. We're going to go back in the tree to a time period before the people would have joined the church, usually middle or so 1700s. And then choose a line that I think maybe has been less researched. And if you have names that will do this, pick people that were in the US, because the US, most of the time, we know how the records work in the US better, and there's a lot of records in the US. And then If I have to, I can actually go back further than the original tree. I can click on a person at the end of the original tree and say, give me that person's ancestors. And that'll get me back, that many more generations back in Puzzilla. So anyway, I'll go find a place, and then I'll be building a descendancy down most of the time, because most of our trees are fairly full, trying to find places where I can add things. One of the things I do mention here, this last thing I think is very important, at least turn on duplicates and check the pedigree back to the person that you're going to build the descendancy from, and just make sure that that line of ancestry back to that person doesn't show duplicates. Because if it shows duplicates, it's possible that's not even a person's ancestor. And so you don't want to be, working on things that aren't really related to the person. Okay, so I went and picked a person, James Sands here, who I'm going to do the descent for. And I've kind of worked in his family before. And so I know what's been done, what hasn't been done. And I know that not many people have worked over in this area. And so what I want to do is I want to hide Michael. You'll see him in blue here. He's a person that I worked on when I first did a Puzzilla presentation, and he had only one descendant. Now he's got all those descendants that you see, practically everything other than where the Michael Sands box is are all of Michael's descendants. And he didn't have anything in tree before, so I know I've done a bunch of stuff on him. But I don't want to do that part of the tree this time. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight Michael and then click that hide show tree. Right now, Michael's part of the tree is showing. When I click on that box, it's going to disappear. And all I'm going to see is that little plus sign. I've just eliminated Michael's descendancy. And now I see what I can work on. I like that. Makes this a lot cleaner, not as messy. A couple of the people have ordinances. I turned on ordinances. You can't see it, but I see an ordinance available there. I see an ordinance available down here already. Most of the people have hints. That's the orange boxes, so that's good. And I'm going to choose a person to work with. And so I chose William D. Sands. That's the guy where the red circle is. When I clicked on him, I saw that he lived to be 81, but he doesn't show any family. So I clicked on show me this person in tree. So here's the little card that came up when I clicked on him. I'm going to say view in family tree. And this is all I got. Born in 1843, died in 1924. No wife or children. So I went to his page and I saw that he had some hints. In fact, it says there's actually 6. I think it's 5 plus person may have children. Suggestion. So I clicked on show all 6, and there's a whole slew of good hints. The third one down is a cemetery record, and there's an image for it. So I said, let's go look at the image, because I know that people and families are usually buried together. And this cemetery list is probably somebody that's gone down through the cemetery, walking the rows, and probably has the families together. So let's see what we can see. And sure enough, when I pull up that image, there's William D. Sands, 1843, 1924. He was in the Civil War. That's what that private company M of the 196 PA volunteers is all about. And he's listed with an Emma Sands, who's born just 4 years after him. Now, it's possible this isn't his wife. It doesn't say wife of. It just says Emma Sands. I know in his family, he doesn't have a sister named Emma. So it's most likely a wife. But I'll go ahead now and I'll source this for at least William right now. I might hold off on Emma for a little bit and see if we can find another source or something that will definitely show me that an Emma born in 1847 married him. Okay, I went back to those sources. Another one was the 1870 census. Now that's a bad census because it doesn't give relationships, but it does list all the family members. And so here's the family he's in. He's in with a family of a Mary, I said Dolman, it's actually Bowman, B-O-L-L-M-A-N, Mary and Sally Bowman. Mary's the mother, probably. She's 53. Sally's 31, probably a daughter. And then there's William Sands and Emma. And I know they're married, even though this census doesn't normally show marriage. It does in their case, because way over here where you see May written on their lines in those boxes there, that's a column for people born within the last 12 months. And if they were, you were to enter the month of their marriage. So in fact, this tells me that Emma was William's wife. And since this was taken on the 15th of August, 1870, that means they got married in May of 1870. And they're living in the home of this Bowman family. So you can probably assume her last name's Bowman, but we don't have any way to prove that yet. So I can source this. I can put her in now as the wife. And so that's what I'll do. And as I'm sourcing it, when I do her, it just said if she was Emma Sands. So I'm just leaving it that way for right now. I could have erased the word Sands and just put Emma there without a last name. That might even be better. But either way, I'm going to get her in the system. That's the key thing. Okay, now the 1880 census, remember they had just gotten married in 1870. The 1880 census is nice because they show up and by then they've had 2 children. And on the census, it shows that Mary Bowman is in fact the mother-in-law. So unless she remarried after Emma was born, Emma's maiden name was most likely Bowman. But I didn't stop there. I looked at yet another hint, the next one down from the Historical Society, marriage records, and there's the marriage record for William D. Sands and Emma Bowman. So through using just some hints on this guy and going through the different hints and sourcing them out, I was able to put together a whole family. And everything agreed, everything made sense. And I had now a family of 4 people, and 3 of them were new in tree. In fact, I actually did some of the Bowman stuff and added them. And so this is really not hard to do at all. So that's our presentation. Let me stop the recording.